There is a rather bizarre article in Aeon by a lady by the name of Charlotte Sleigh, I believe, which for some reason takes objection to Sir Karl Popper, the philosopher, and blames him for all sorts of things which have gone bad and which have gone wrong in our society. And it's very difficult to see what on earth she's getting at. And, she makes extreme, very subjective, very obviously foolish claims. And the question is, why did Aeon, which seems quite a middle of the road, quite a respectable website, why do they publish this type of fake news or fake science or pseudoscience? And the answer, I suppose, is because there's a market for it. And of course, this really answers the question which Sir Karl Popper raised: what is the difference between a science and a pseudoscience? And the answer is there is no difference. There's a market for both science and pseudoscience and for everything else, and a bunch of lies. But there are things, but science that of the sort that Popper liked, the stuff he liked, but not all of it. Some of the stuff he liked could pay for itself on the supply side by changing actual supply of economic goods and services. So that's the difference. There's a market for pseudoscience, and there's a market for nonsense, and there's a market for lies, and there's a market for for stuff which actually changes your productivity, which makes you more productive, which makes you richer, which changes your life chances, which changes how healthy you are, how well fed you are, how many kids you can have who don't fucking die of, And there's a market for everything. But when you buy some things, then your productivity actually changes. The supply side to the entire economy changes. And but it's not just like physics, but it's also good type of law, good type of economics, good type of accountancy, good type of anything which is essentially a protocol bound, has a juristic aspect and which is backstopped. In other words, any system of making social choices, which you kind of go, yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough, Gov, yeah. I'm not going to push this because I had my grievance, I've vented my grievance, that guy vented, and, you got a smart person who's going, well, weighing this up and that up, you pay this, and let's all carry on. And if you don't do that, because your own friends are going to go, you had your day in court. And if you're going to, be a shit about it, you're going to be a fucking asshole, go be a fucking asshole on your own. So long as there are juristic, protocol-bound processes to make decisions, to say, yeah, this is lawful, this isn't lawful. Yeah, you're entitled to this, and you paid for this, you get this, but you're not entitled to that. So long as you have these buck stopped, in other words, the buck stops somewhere. You can't just carry on arguing the toss forever. I mean, you can in the classroom because you're talking to kids, adolescents, and you're trying to get them to stop masturbating and rubbing up against each other. That's a different matter. So, you had Karl Popper, who, was was struck by the genius of Tarski, and Tarski is a first-rate mind. Tarski, Turing, Gödel, these are smart people. But, then you have Kripke, and then, things move on. Kripke essentially shows that the Tarskian system, that you can have a language, a formal language, which has its own truth predicate. I think Kripke shows this in, I'm not sure exactly when, but, Popper was definitely alive. Either in the 60s, it was before I went to college. It was definitely before I went to college, which was in 1979. But that's fucking obvious. If you have a language which isn't, which can't do very much, then it can have its own truth predicate. Sure. So, impredicativity, and the notion of the intentional. These notions. Russell had clarified that you have a theory of types, and it's really not that. It's really not a very big deal, because right at the start of Western philosophy, you have the notion of categoros. What does categoros mean? Category. What does it mean? And essentially, it's a judicial term. It's a term for lawyers. It's a at a time when there were very few. Well, there were no professional lawyers. You had the ecclesia. You had the entire tribe, or the old men of the tribe turning up, and they'd get some food if they turned up, and then you'd have somebody read out a charge, and you'd say, you accuse this man of whatever, and then they'd vote on it, and they'd hear the arguments on both sides, and this was the ecclesia. It was the tribal assembly, and this is the context in which you have Plato and Socrates and so on and so forth. Plato's importance is that he says, instead of just learning how to memorize some shit which a professional sophist, a professional lawyer wrote for you, and instead of just specializing in oratory and memorizing the shit, why not study a bit of maths? And then Aristotle's going, and why stop at maths? How about biology? How about other stuff? So that's how you have the modern Western academy or lyceum, and that's a good thing because maths is a good thing. Now, let's get back to Popper. Now, Popper, poor chap, he wasn't very academically gifted, or precocious, I should say, but he worked hard. But the fact is that, his uncle was Popper Lynkeus. And Popper Lynkeus is a very, very influential author. He's a chap who sort of rose from poverty. In some senses, an autodidact, but in other senses, he is he's somebody that here in this country, we identify him with people like Michael Faraday. We would say, this is a chap who, but more than that, because he's got the scientific aspect, he's got the literary aspect. He's a chap who rose up by his own bootstraps and who wrote in a very charming and easy style. He pondered the big questions of the time. He's a smart guy. Working class, Jewish, from like Silesia or whatever. So, it's like Freud's dad. Basically the guy started off as a traveling, not basically not a traveling salesman, but, a guy who goes from village to village, a hawker. And, you see some of the greatest names in any field And these are people who are very proud. They are very, very proud to trace their descent to hawkers. And one step lower than a hawker was a strolling player. Apparently Yiddish theatre was really fucking great. And I'm talking about a situation where Jews were very badly treated and were in German cities. If you have three sons, one son can stay and carry on your profession. The other two, they have to get out. And this is Yiddish. Now Yiddish is recognized as a superb literary, like actually Goethe studied Yiddish. And everything that I see, I mean, half the good comedy. I mean, I'm watching Curb Your Enthusiasm or something, and they're saying "Schande for the Goyim," and so this is the natural development from Seinfeld, and before Seinfeld there was Woody Allen, and before basically the great current of Jewish comedy is flowing way back into the Musar Judaic tradition of very careful judicial hermeneutics. And Musar is the equitable aspect of judicial hermeneutics. It's equitable. It's that's all, and we've got that in Hinduism. But in Greek thought, of course, it's there. Aristotle is making a distinction between akribia, rigid adherence to a law or a rule, and economia. And the word economia, this is developed by the, oikos. Oikos means your family. Then it develops into oikumene. All our families, those families who speak the same language, they recognize each other as being roughly equal. We can give our daughters to each other, and eat together, and celebrate the same rituals or the same ceremonies. And the word theoria in Greek, one origin of that word has to do with sending, when this city holds some celebration, and city, I mean, small settlement. So, the guys from over here are invited, please send your very respected people, and they go along and they see how those guys do perform the rituals, and it's a barbecue basically. They'll kill some goats, and but this is how they start going. Well, we do these things slightly differently. Why do you do it differently? And it's the start of the notion that behind the seeming difference between how those guys on the other side of the river speak and the way we speak, there is a common grammar. There is something, genealogical. There is, and this is Aristotle. So theoria, praxis. Yeah, praxis is what happens. Theoria, but then you have experiment. So these ideas have always been there. They exist in every country. So long as what happens is that in each civilization at a certain point, you have to have jurisprudence. When you make a contract with somebody you don't know in a faraway place, there has to be some notion that, okay, the thing is justiciable. This agreement is justiciable, because that reduces uncertainty. So, first you have a demand for justice as a service industry, and then justice arises. It's not the case that first there's justice and then there are contracts. No, first there are contracts and then there is justice. First, there are people, performing rituals. You know, and then there is religion. First, there is the mystery, and then there is the religion which explains it, which says, well, these mysteries tie us all up together. These individual actions, well, they're not individual. They're this clan, that clan, this sept, that sept. You know, they're chopping up a goat, basically, or a cow, or whatever it may be, whatever they had. And then having a nice meal, prayers and bhajan, or pray bhajan. Okay, and we don't actually chop up a goat, but we do chop up vegetables. Aloo gobi, oh yes, making fulka chapati, yes please, and whatever, I mean, there is bhajan and then there is bhojan. There is prayer and there is food. And I prefer the food, But that's, as I get older, and I've just turned 58, and I can imagine that in 20 years I'll be more interested in the bhajan than the bhojan, because I won't be able to, I can only eat one fulka. No, not now. Now I can eat 10 fulka. I'm still hatta katta. Yes, look at my tummy. Should I show you my nipple? I'm sorry, I've gotten into the habit of showing my nipples on YouTube videos because, let's face it, I want to attract that sex-starved, crowd of you young people, because I know that you're all lusting after my body, and I don't know. Rihana, hum bhi koi hai, Rihana. Anyway, so I was stroking my nipple. That is my nipple, by the way. Anyway, I just want to clarify that my nipple is always available for pornographic purpose. So, and when you watch these videos, you should always have that sense of expectancy. Any moment now, he may show his nipples. So anyway, let's get back to Papa. And, Papa, poor chap, he needed to get a PhD to get out of fucking Vienna, where the Nazis were, preparing to invade. And the only type of wealth that the Jews and other, Palestinian Christians, I've seen Palestinian Christians, family, I've written about this, that they invest very heavily in education, and initially you may be going, portfolio choice-wise, why are you investing so much in education? And the answer is because they knew that their situation was, even in Kuwait or in this place or that place, which looks safe. I mean, Kuwait looked extremely safe for Palestinians. But things can change, especially for Christians. You see, because they're Christians, and they invest in credentials, and Edward Said is part of that nonsense. Even though he liked literature, but he ended up basically opening a door to worthless credentials in a worthless subject. But you can understand it if you understand that he came from a refugee Christian background, where ultimately the only type of capital that they could cross borders with was human capital and credentials, so. Anyway, so Papa was part of that class. He worked hard, and, the reason that in New Zealand, he was taken to New Zealand was because, he could teach high school maths, he could teach high school physics, and, we don't really care if you're a philosopher. Basically, you come there and you teach, and he did. He worked hard. And then he came to LSE and he worked bloody hard. He was a hard worker. He's a good guy. Now, this lady, Charlotte, whatever her name is, Shield or something, I forget. She's written this article in the Aeon magazine saying, no, Papa very bad. But why was Papa bad? She says, oh, it's because of falsifiability. falsifiability. Oh, it's so naughty. But why is it naughty? And she gives a paranoid sort of. She says, "Oh, Papa has really harmed society because he has set an impossibly high standard of falsifiability. This justifies climate skepticism. It justifies the anti-vaccination type of people. Oh, but this is foolish. It's not true. It's not true. The fact is that the U.S. Judiciary, they've relied on Popper's work. It's quoted. It is quoted in judgments, in American judgments, of a very positive type. They say, okay, look, evolution, yes, is scientific. Creationism is not scientific. What more do you want? You see, the fact is that all that Popper is saying is that in any protocol-bound juristic decision process, okay, either it's buck stopped or it isn't. I'm sort of now moving on to Kripke, because Tarski went this far, and then after Tarski there are other people. There are people like Kripke, and if it's a protocol-bound juristic or other similar epistemic decision process, either it's buck stopped, either at some point the buck stops with the High Court or the Supreme Court or the funding authority, and it doesn't matter because they can at that point they can overrule themselves. There's no stare decisis at the level of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can change its fundamental interpretation of any constitution or whatever. So really there is no big problem here at all. Popper's criteria, okay, yeah, they fail. Because, poor chap, he thought Einstein must be in the right. And I think, if you go back to Popper Linnaeus, his maternal, his uncle, Linnaeus was such a popular writer. Einstein and so forth, Jabotinsky was influenced by Linnaeus, Popper Linnaeus, his uncle. But it's very practical, and it's really socially very quite decent and straightforward. It's the idea that, look, whether a person is female or male or of this family or that family, come on, they're still human. And let's all get together. And when you're young, you can work hard and you love it. You actually like that discipline when you're young. When you're a bit old, it gets a bit tough. But everybody works and everybody gets a stake in the society and they get rewarded for it. There's nothing wrong in that. It's actually how families work. Because, when you're young, you can really run around and chase after the itty baby, and baby, shits on you and he bites you, and it's fantastic. But when you're old, you can't run around that much. And babies also, I've noticed, babies change, because they're treating you with respect. And I'm 58. I'm not that old. And I feel, I see the baby and I'm thinking, he's a baby. He doesn't know that I'm 58. And, it's not like, how could he know that I don't have the stamina and the strength and the, to be able to chase him around as he would wish, in 6 months' time, or, because babies grow up fast. But now, babies are actually very respectful to me, And when I was young, baby used to, laugh and then, because this is a prelude. It was a prelude to years of, at least 1 or 2 years of chasing each other and rough and tumble, and because I was young, and but now I'm old. I don't know. Anyway, so Popper, not a bad guy. I suppose you could say, oh, but what about George Soros? What about George Soros? You know, he's a billionaire, and like a lot of other billionaires, he has acted in a self-interested manner, but in a self-defeating manner by funding 36 billion, which has increased his salience. It increased his salience to the point where he is now the scapegoat for everything. He's like, oh, Soros, horns. But that's because he paid for third-rate people to talk third-rate shite and to try to campaign. And this is what's called second-order public goods. A second-order public good is not where you actually do something first-order. In other words, you produce more food or more this or that, or you create a scientific discovery. And instead of that, he funded a bunch of third-rate people, agitating for, we want more human rights. But, human rights are linked to remedies. There is no right without a remedy, and he's not creating the remedies because remedies are economic. They have to be incentive compatible. Otherwise, if there's no remedy corresponding to a right, the right doesn't exist. Madoff, he was creating rights to a comfortable retirement, or he took money from, I think, from charities, including like a Holocaust charity. He was Jewish, but he took money from a Holocaust charity. But why did they give him the money? It's because they believed, this is a Wall Street wizard, just like Soros, Wall Street wizard. A humble and simple guy like Soros, very humble, very simple, And we know that because our money is with him, he's told us, every year you're going to get this amount of money. So you carry on. You make your plans and don't worry about the money because I'm sorting that out. So they thought that they had a right, but they didn't have any right to anything at all. Because there's no remedy, because the guy was a crook. And now, people who actually made some positive return from their Madoff investment, they have to give that money back. Why? Because Madoff was a crook. They didn't earn that money. They have no right to it. That money has to go back. And Soros, he somehow got the idea that Helsinki Agreement back in mid-70s, human rights. Okay, so human rights is a wedge. You can you can create leverage out of human rights, but human rights basically don't exist. Human rights only exist if there's a remedy. But who's the obligations holder who's going to provide that remedy? Nobody. Now you can have a bunch of high-priced lawyers who can use human rights legislation which has been passed to help the billionaire stay out of jail in America. They can say, his human rights will be violated if he has to go to America and go to the federal prison. But you see, that human right is being rationed by the legal system, by the high-priced attorney. It doesn't vest in you by reason of your being human. It vests in you only by reason of your having a lot of money. And okay, maybe they'll do pro bono, and if you're a human rights lawyer and you can get off this gang rapist and serial killer on the grounds of human rights, if you can get him off, it's an advertisement. Because then the big crooked billionaires, they go, put that guy on a retainer. Because when I'm charged with anything, that's the guy I want, or the lady. It may be Amal Clooney, it may be Sherry Blair. Even better, or maybe if you're accused of killing black people, have a handsome, beautiful black person to represent you, human rights lawyer, then she'll get more money. So this is a story, but Popper is not implicated in any of this. Actually, Hart also Jewish. In fact, Hart was the descendant of the Katzenelnbogen rabbi who was briefly king of Poland. So there's a Jewish king of Poland. Because what happened was that the person who was elected couldn't take the Radziwill. Radziwills are married into the Kennedy family. So there's a Radziwill prince, and he said, "Well, I can't take the job because I don't know, he was in prison or he was I don't know what it was." So the Katzenelnbogen rabbis, and actually, if you read about not just them, but other great rabbinical families, you find all the most modern ideas. You find them there. The Jews were a law-minded people, and their system of logical reasoning, of juristic reasoning, is extremely subtle. It's amazing. And, when you look at what we now call category theory, directed graphs, category theory, sequent calculi, to some extent, it's there in the Stoic schools. If you look at the notion of oikiosis, oikiosis really means belonging and what is natural to you and what you can appropriate. And so this is really the notion which Robert Oman, a great Jewish again, Robert Oman has found game theory in the Talmud. He's found it in the decisions of the Sanhedrin. He's a great man, real smart. But nothing compared to the great rabbis and, the tradition from which he comes. What I'm trying to say is that secularized Judaism, Kravatian Judaism, where the cravat rather than the kaftan, it's a pale echo of a 1,000-year-old tradition, or much longer than that. And I know absolutely shit about it. I'm a fucking low-level Tamil Brahmin who doesn't know shit about shit. But this is the comedy of the thing, that anti-Semitism is alive and well, because this aspect of Jewish law, which educated people always found very, very seductive once they knew about it. And, like from the 5th century in Spain, Christianity was already there. But you have bishops. The bishop is trying to increase his knowledge, and he starts reading about how the Jewish interpretations of their scripture and so on, and their judicial reasoning. And the guy's suddenly going, "Oh my God, this stuff makes sense. This is it." And then they convert to Judaism. That's why anti-Semitism revived in that part of the world. Otherwise, it was, it's because Judaism was competitive. And I remember, the book I was reading was by a Christian, a Catholic, and the Catholic put it this way. He said, "Well, the reason that the Jews are making converts among the very higher ranks of the church was because the rabbis were giving sermons in the vernacular language." But that isn't it. That isn't true. By the time you're a bloody bishop or a priest, you're not interested in the vernacular language. What you're interested in is excellence and what we may call harmonious construction. if you can see a judicial system which has harmonious construction, which has, you know, superior symmetric properties, then, you know, you would say that this is the catacomb. This is not, you know, the eschaton may be Christian. That may be true. In other words, the end of the world may involve Lord Jesus Christ saying, well, you screwed up because you didn't believe in me. But the catacomb, in other words, what keeps things going, it's Jewish. Nothing wrong in that. Because we do want to keep the world going. Even if we ourselves die suddenly and we are judged and sent to the bad place. The reason is that when you look around, you can see, well, not so much here in London, but even here in London, actually, here in London, there are people who look exactly like me. I mean, as I did when I was young and pretty, but they've never had a bloody chance. And, you know, the drugs and this and that and the, you know, yeah, I have to admit, you got to keep the catacomb going. You got to keep the show on the road so that these guys, they get a chance. And screw the eschaton, you know, because we're okay, because we can easily be on the right side of that. But that's because we had things easy. We had things spoon-fed to us. So we've got to keep the world going. We've got to, you know, be part of the catacomb rather than the eschaton. Anyway, is there any harm in the notion of falsifiability? And the answer is no, because in any juristic decision process, either a thing is falsifiable and false, or it's something, you know, where, for example, in a criminal case, we'll say the benefit of the doubt. But in a civil case, balance of probabilities. So in the one case, there's a punitive judgment. In the other case, there isn't. But there's inequitable judgments. So that's all we're talking about. We're talking about different categories. And the very word categoros, you know, if you look in the Bible, it really has this, in fact, it has a devilish, a satanic notion, because the notion of Satan as a prosecutor, you know, this is a notion which is there in the rabbinical tradition, because, you know, it must be emphasized that Athens and Jerusalem may have once been separate, but they were not separate by the time of the second book of Maccabees. The second book of Maccabees is written in Koine Greek. So, you know, what is the point of pretending that these are two independent and they are conflicting? They weren't. You have a book in the Old Testament, it's accepted in Catholicism, which was written in Koine Greek. It wasn't written in Hebrew. So, you know, what's the fuss about? How can you say that Jerusalem is separate from Athens? One and the same thing. Anyway, to conclude, yeah, you know, there's a very, you know, Charlotte, what's her name, wrote a foolish article in Aeon. And the question is, why? You know, what is the point of telling these sort of stupid lies? Because anybody can just, on their smartphone, they can look things up and they can see that these are stupid lies. And it is sad. It is sad that this has happened. But I suppose it's globalized capitalism. She has a book to sell, and Aeon will shill that book and take some money from it. So I don't know how it works, but perhaps that's the way it works, or perhaps not. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for listening.